I'm Dave Sleet, and this is a Sleet Report. Now, if there's one thing you could say about the Israelites, it's that they were forgetful and... Hang on, start again. Now, if there's two things you could say about the Israelites, it's that they were forgetful and fickle and... No, start again. If there's three things you could say about the Israelites, it's that they were forgetful and fickle and really ungrateful to God and... If there's four things... No. This could go on a while, so let's stop at 3. So, while Ehud, the left-handed rescuer, was around, everything had gone quite well for the Israelites. But as soon as he snuffed it, they probably forgot about everything God had done for them. And they forgot about living the way God wanted. And they started ignoring him and doing whatever they wanted instead, living however they wanted to live. So much for being God's special people. Now, God wasn't about to let them get away with this because it was wrong and because he knew that they would be so much better off living his way and actually remembering that he was their God. So he punished them by letting the Canaanites rule over them for 20 years, who were very cruel to them for all those 20 years. And if that doesn't get the message through, I don't know what will. But thankfully, it did get the message through. After 20 years of nastiness from the Canaanites, it finally occurred to the Israelites that God might be able to help them. Duh! So they cried out to him for help. And of course, because God is the very opposite of forgetful and fickle, non-forgetful and anti-fickle, or reliable and faithful if you prefer, God helped them. He sent another rescuer. But this time, God used not one, not two, but 3 different people to rescue the Israelites. Yep, 3, which may seem a bit excessive when he'd only used one at a time up till now, but it did mean that it was very obvious who it was who was doing the real rescuing. Superman! No, not Superman. Someone much better than that. God! Yes, of course. God was the real rescuer behind it all. But who are these 3 rescuers, I hear you ask? Okay, fine, I didn't hear you ask, but I imagine that's the sort of thing you might be asking. Work with me a bit here. No, fine, I will start again. But who were these 3 rescuers, I hear me ask? Well, a good question, so I'll tell you. The first rescuer was a woman called Deborah. She's the one the Bible calls Israel's judge. Now, she was a prophet, which means she gave messages from God to the people. She was actually quite a good judge, quite a good leader. She was good and wise, and most importantly, she listened to God. The Israelites would come to her when they were having an argument, and she would sort it out for them. She was good like that, but God's people needed someone to rescue them from the Canaanites. Now, because Deborah was a woman, she could not lead an army into battle, because women didn't do that in those days. No, the Israelites needed some sort of military leader to get rid of the Canaanites for them. And that brings us to the second rescuer, Barak. Barak was called in to lead the army. God told Deborah to tell Barak that he should get an army together and go and fight the Canaanites. And God would give the victory to Barak. So that's what he did. But he didn't go alone. He told Deborah that he would only go if she went with him. Which makes it sound like he was a bit of a big girl's blouse who couldn't go into battle unless he had Deborah holding his hand. But that may not have been what he meant. You see, as God's judge and prophet, Deborah going with him was a bit like a picture of God going with him. It may have been that Barak realized that he would only win if God was with him too, which is a very sensible thing to realize. Well done, Barak. Possibly. So, Barak got his army together and went to fight the Canaanites. Now, the Canaanites were scary. They had 900 chariots. The Israelites had no chariots. Chariots were like the latest state-of-the-art weapons. The Israelite army had no chance against them. But who do we know who would have no problem with as many chariots as you can produce? God, of course. As we know, it was God who was a real rescuer in this situation, and the chariots were not even nearly a problem for him. Barak and his army couldn't have fought against the Canaanite chariots, but God could. And with his strength, God's people won the battle. Hooray! Now, there was just one loose end to tie up. Sisera, the man who was in charge of the Canaanite army, escaped the battle and he ran away. It wasn't a proper victory until the leader of the enemy army was defeated. But Barak wasn't the one who God had chosen to defeat Sisera. God had told him that he wouldn't be the one to do that. That task fell to a third rescuer, a woman called Jael. And once again, God was proving that he was really the one in control and doing all the rescuing. A woman defeating Sisera instead of the Israelites' military leader? A woman? That was probably worse than being left-handed in those days. A woman could not win a victory like that. And that's what people would have thought. And not only was Jael a woman, she wasn't even an Israelite. It's almost like God is in charge of the whole world, and not just the Israelites. Oh wait, he is. He is in charge of the whole world, and not just the Israelites. Of course he is. He's God. So, there was Jael, a woman, not one of God's people, and God was about to use her to rescue his people. She was in a tent she lived in when Sisera, running away from the battle, came and asked her to hide him. She said she would. She gave him something to drink and a blanket to cover him, and he felt safe enough to fall asleep. That's when she killed him with a tent peg, which wasn't a very nice thing to do, and so don't try this at home, especially not on your brother. Seriously, Jael was not a good role model at all. She lied. She murdered someone, and she was a very bad hostess. What she did was wrong, and the fact that God was using her to rescue his people doesn't excuse it. Because sometimes we can't see the whole picture like God can, and we can't understand why he does the things the way he does. But what we do know is that God always does the right thing. And now he rescued his people yet again. All the way through, it was God who was the rescuer. He'd used Deborah, Barak, and Jael along the way, but he was a real rescuer. He told his people what to do, he won the battle through his strength, he defeated Sisera, he rescued his people from the Canaanites. He was the only one who could do it. And all this for people who'd been ignoring him and treating him like rubbish. Amazing. Now that is a great God.